Good morning, everybody. So this is Roberto Blake helping you create something awesome today. Today, I'm going to be doing an episode of my Create Something Awesome Today podcast. And I'm doing something very interesting with help from my sponsor, StreamYard. I actually am streaming this currently on Facebook as well as to LinkedIn, YouTube on the podcast channel, and to Periscope in Twitter right now, all at once. And we're also streaming to my membership group, Awesome Creator Academy. So I'm actually streaming in 5 places across 4 platforms at once with StreamYard, you guys. So that's actually really cool. And they are a sponsor, just full disclosure. And I'm going to add that to the show notes later. But I wanted to do an impromptu podcast with you today and talk about boundaries. So for those of you, since doing it in the live stream format is something very new and something I'm doing, I want you guys to know that for the first 3 or 5 minutes, I'm going to welcome you guys in. I'm going to kind of warm up here, have some water, and then we're going to go into the actual show. And I'm going to cue the intro, start the recording, and do the format. So I just want to say hi to a lot of you, Gabe, Willie, Tom, Brooke. Really appreciate you guys showing up. I see a lot of you trickling in. So we're going to be talking about the importance of boundaries. I'm going to just chat with you guys for like 2 or 3 minutes before I start the podcast recording. And so anybody watching the replay, the show happens in about 3 or 4 minutes from now. We'll probably timestamp these later. In fact, actually, I might just ask Brooke from my team to start doing the timestamps for the live show whenever I do the podcast. And guys, I'm going to try to do these podcasts at least once a week, even if I don't have a guest. So hold me accountable. I also am planning later this week to do a recorded episode with a guest, and then we'll upload the recording. We have plans to have the clips edited. So just be on the lookout for that. And eventually, not unlike my friend Viper, I will eventually get the audio up to date for the audio podcast for you guys. So please make sure you're checking out the Create Something Awesome Today podcast everywhere where you can find podcasts. If you're on Facebook, make sure you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook so that I can get to see your face. That's just a user privacy thing. But StreamYard is dope. It's awesome. We got a great show for you today, and they actually do help us out with that as a sponsor. And I have a lot of really cool things planned for bringing back the podcast. So thank you guys for supporting me. And if you can share out the podcast, if you could definitely make sure you check out the older episodes in iTunes, Spotify, and we should be in Amazon Music now. That would be dope. So thank you. I'm just going to have a little bit of water here, and then we're going to get into the show. All right. Let's do this. So also need to set that.
Welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast, where it's all about educating and motivating creative pros and entrepreneurs from around the world with simple and easy to implement ideas. And of course, helping you create something awesome today. And now, welcome your host. He is the founder of Awesome Creator Academy, a YouTube educator, and the biggest Star Wars nerd you'll ever meet, Roberto Blake.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast. This is your host, Roberto Blake, helping you create something awesome today. Today, I want to talk about something really important that I think is meaningful to a lot of us. I want to talk about the importance of setting and establishing boundaries and enforcing them. And this is true for you, whether you're a content creator, whether you're somebody on social media. I feel that the importance of boundaries is something that we don't talk nearly enough about. And I learned this lesson partly as a consequence of things that I went through that I hope you don't have to go through. I learned this by not having them in my corporate life, in not having and establishing and enforcing them in some of my personal relationships, whether it was with friends, family, or romantic partners. It was something that I didn't fully appreciate until maybe my mid to late 20s And I'd already established a lot of bad habits with this. And it's still something I struggle with to this day, is knowing how to sometimes set my boundaries and how to say no to things and how to say no to people. And it's important because it's not about rejecting them, it's about respecting yourself. I think that so many of us don't want to reject people and we don't want to feel like we're missing out on opportunities. FOMO, fear of missing out, is a real thing in the space, whether you are an established content creator or you're an aspiring content creator, social media user, even as an entrepreneur. Setting healthy boundaries and making sure that people respect your boundaries and respect you, and that you feel that you are comfortable in a situation, is important. And a lot of times the reason for creator burnout is people encroaching on our boundaries and us not respecting ourselves. And this takes a lot of different forms. It could be everything from you taking on too much in terms of brand deals, collaborations, opportunities. It could also be sometimes feeling overly obliged, or really just being emotionally leveraged even by your own audience. Your audience doesn't mean this, but sometimes they could put a pressure on you because you haven't established and set boundaries. And a lot of people don't know how to say, hey, this part of my life is off limits to you, or this is the way that I want to be treated. This is the boundary for communicating with me. And you have to respect that. And you're not owed something just because you support me. You're owed respect, you're owed courtesy, but you're not owed intimacy, and you're not owed access. And this is true whether you're a younger creator, an older creator, whether you're female, male, whatever it is. People have to respect your boundaries when it comes to communicating with you and how much access they're allowed to have, and also not feeling that they're entitled or privy to the intimacy or details of your life, your business, your finances, anything that you say is off limits. They are not owed that just because they support you or they donate to you, they watch you, whatever it is. And this is a super important message. So please, guys, make sure you're sharing the podcast, whether you're watching live as we broadcast this, or whether you're listening to the replay or you're watching the replay. This message, I feel, is very important. And it applies in so many different ways. I know there's some more obvious ones to people, but there's some not so obvious ones to people. I know so many content creators that are in this tech or the tutorial space. They'll make videos about cameras or tutorial software or whatever. And then there are people who will insist on treating them like tech support, or like they're a part of that company, and that, well, I'll just use them like the tech support line and they owe me this because I support them. I see it happen to a lot of my friends all the time. It's happened to me before as well. And that's just a more benign example of just crossing boundaries. Now, we do want to help you and answer questions, and we do want to make sure that if we recommended something, that you're getting a good experience out of it. But there are lines and there are limits to that. And we can't do that all day, every day, and then still make the content that you enjoy. That's not how it works. It's not fair to the rest of the people in the community. And a lot of times we're not there to stand in for you doing a Google search. So that's just like something to think about in terms of one way that people don't respect boundaries. Another more obvious one is all the people who show up to content creators' homes, whether it's David Dobrik or Rosanna Pansino or Jacksepticeye, any number of creators who've come out about this, is you're not allowed to do that. And there are mid-tier working class creators who are very popular or go viral that still work day jobs. And I've known content creators. I know a female content creator that I have a good relationship with in Twitter was talking about this very openly, that there have been people that have been showing up at her regular day job. She is not a full-time content creator yet. She still needs that day job to supplement her income. And they put that in jeopardy by trying to show up. And they make her very uncomfortable by doing that. And I know that they don't intend to harass, and I know that they don't intend to infringe, but again, they're not thinking this through, and they're not respecting people's boundaries. And it's not limited to young people. You would think this be limited to young people, people under 21, people under 18. It's grown adults. It is people in their 20s or sometimes even their 30s that do this sometimes. And it's so uncomfortable and unreasonable because you also know that this could be a setup to make it look like you're ungrateful or you're entitled or you're spoiled, and to try to cancel you, is that people could set up these contrived interactions. But the thing is, you're not obligated to be nice about any of this, and it's not a cause for cancellation, and it's not you disrespecting your fans. It's their fans or people in the space not respecting your personal and private boundaries. Watching someone on the internet does not entitle you to take a selfie with them in the street when they're eating dinner, does not entitle you to approach them or walk up to them on the street just because you run into them, does not entitle you to find out where they work, memorize their schedule, and try to show up there, or meet them in the parking lot when they're trying to go home, or follow them to their home, or do any of those things. None of that is okay. None of that is reasonable. And that is something that happens in our space more often than you might think. Some people don't talk about it because they don't want to add to it, or they don't want to inveigle themselves into drama. So like, this is really important. And then you have some young influencers that actually entertain or invite this. And I'm not blaming them or saying it's their fault. A lot of them don't know better, but they like and want the attention so much that they refuse to, or they don't set boundaries. And some of it is their projection. They would have liked to have a closeness or a friendship or intimacy with their favorite content creator when they were growing up. So they don't set healthy or proper boundaries with their own fans, and they encourage a culture of this sometimes. And they only figure out at a later point, when things escalate, that it's a bad idea. But it sets a bad precedent, and it normalizes these things. And that's also a problem, is you have to sometimes consider how your actions affect your fellow creators and what we make normal in this space. And so that's something that, again, I just really haven't heard a lot of people, until it becomes a problem, talk about. And I haven't heard that addressed in a lot of the creator podcasts that I consume. And I want to talk about a lot of these important issues. I want to talk about business stuff, obviously, but I want to talk about what it's actually like to live as a content creator, because a lot of people, when they open up about the lifestyle, they talk about the opportunities. They're going out of their way to make it abundantly clear and message that they are grateful, and to be perceived to be humble. And I'm not saying that they are not, or that it's disingenuous, but I am going to acknowledge that cancel culture is a real thing. Pettiness is a real thing. And especially in a time when more people are at home and don't have anything to do and are bored, and also are having this syndrome of haves versus have-nots, that it's just a realistic thing that they'll look at any excuse, any impropriety, any rudeness as a reason to call someone out. And again, sometimes it's a setup and sometimes it's contrived. And I just think that that's important to recognize. And a lot of times it's unwarranted and undeserved. And this has a lot to do with boundaries. And it has to do with the concept of entitlement as well. Now, recently, and I am going to, in this case, name someone, and I'm going to get into a recent internet controversy. There's a YouTube content creator and streamer named Pokimane. Her real name is Emaine. And I'm not somebody that's like a huge mega fan of hers as a streamer or anything like that. I do respect her hustle, and I think she makes, a solid effort in terms of content. I think that she's earned her success. She's been doing this for about 7 years or so about 7-8 years, which is about the same length of time as me. And a big controversy happened because people wanted to speculate about whether she had a boyfriend or not, which is not really their business. And people wanted to insinuate that the only reason she's very popular or makes a lot of money as a Twitch streamer is because people are expecting or hoping that they have a shot or a chance with her in terms of an intimate relationship. Number one, that kind of disrespects the viewer or the consumer of content. We support creators all the time, and nobody says that about the female supporters of Mr. Beast or PewDiePie or Jacksepticeye or any number of people. So there's a double standard, I think, for women in the industry, where it's implied that their success or any support of them is in bad faith or has an ulterior motive. I think that in both ways is sexist toward the people supporting, and I think it's sexist toward the streamer. And I don't use those words very often or very lightly, but I think it's important to call it like I see it. You know me, I'm a no BS kind of guy, radical candor all the way here. And so I think that's kind of a trash point of view to have on something, and I don't think it accounts for objectivity. And then on the other side of that, the reality is that people are entitled to spend their money how they want. That's how capitalism works. No one really, as long as you're in compliance with the law, no one really gets to, in my opinion, judge you for what you want to do with the money that you earned. And I also think in this economy, it's no point in hating on people for how they earn their money. So the implication here was the idea that, well, if we expose that she has a boyfriend or confirm or challenge, why doesn't she say she has one or what she doesn't, is that there's a benefit or a financial gain to that, or that she's somehow manipulating her audience. And I felt that that was unfair for a couple of reasons. And one of them is creator boundaries exist, and someone doesn't owe you an explanation when it comes to their private life and their intimate relationships. And I think it's a bad faith argument, and I think it's manipulative. I think that she was being accused, and this is, by the way, this entire stream and broadcast isn't a defense of Pokimane or any individual creator or to attack people for their criticism. It's to use this as an example and as a teachable moment about why these boundaries matter and how these boundaries are infringed upon. And then often even the culture and the community of content creators does it themselves in bad faith. And I'll use this example again. So I think that any content creator is allowed to set the boundary and say, you don't have access to this part of my personal life. Let's use Casey Neistat. Casey Neistat does not show his young daughters' faces in his social media and his content. That is a boundary that has been set. It is a boundary that the community is respected and not try to sneak or get glimpses or post their faces. They're respecting the boundaries that he set with his children. Gary Vaynerchuk does the exact same thing. These are men who have set boundaries on you, the audience, us, the community, not having access to that level of intimacy with their family life, their private life, their children. And nobody thinks that it's okay to cross that boundary, and everyone would be called out on that and would be told that's not okay. Why the double standard on a, I believe, 24-year-old female content creator and people feeling that that's transparency and the insistence that they must know whether or not she's single or not, and if not, who she's dating. And it's a bad faith argument when you literally have dozens, if not hundreds of people making commentary and criticism videos, and sometimes crossing the line of attacking you as a content creator to then insist on having one more layer of access and intimacy to your private life. And how is that fair to that person? That person has the right to say, just because I'm dating a public figure doesn't mean I want to be one. So where's the right to privacy for the other person in that relationship? You might say, well, you're a public figure. You're supposed to take criticism. You're a public figure. Be transparent with your audience. Your audience doesn't get to know your bank account. They don't get to know where you live, and they don't get to know, if you don't want them to, who you date, who you sleep with, who your friends and family are by name and where they are and who they are. No, those things are off limits. It's trash to say otherwise. Those are boundaries that people set, and they have to be respected. And you can't accuse someone and say that they're manipulating their audience with that when you're manipulating the audience because if that person says, fine, here's my significant other, here's my partner, you're just going to pick apart and dig into that person's life for views. That's a bad faith argument. That's a bad faith criticism. Sorry, it is. And it's manipulative, and it's deceptive, and it's a double standard. And it, again, in many cases is a double standard applied to women and not to men. And I'm just going to call it like it is. And it's a load of crap. So I thought that was important to state. And I feel that way for a lot of reasons. One, I have a lot of friends who are female content creators, but I'm also an older brother. And I've watched a society where I'm very thoughtful and fearful about the boundaries of my sisters not being respected. It's why I set a boundary to where you guys don't get to see my siblings very often. My youngest sister is, she does some auditions and she does some modeling, and she's been a model in some of my camera reviews and so on and so forth. But why have I not plugged her social media handles and things like that? It's because I don't want the crossover. Even though I have a great community, I love you guys and audience, there's some bad faith people that watch my content, or there are some people that have a negative view of me. I don't want that to infringe or bleed over to people in my life that aren't at a level where they have a larger platform to, say, defend themselves, or where they have not had experience with that level of criticism, or to where they've already had bad experiences with bullying that make them, as a smaller content creator, question whether any of this is worth it. And so I think that protecting the boundaries of new people in the space, new content creators, smaller content creators, but also your friends and family, is appropriate. And I don't think that just because you're a public figure that everyone in your life is open season or fair game and everything like that. And I think it's one of the most manipulative things that people do, or use as an argument, and then they throw the word transparency out there. That's not what transparency is. Boundaries exist, and if you said, hey, this is off limits, and hey, the people that are my friends, my family in real life, or the person I'm dating in real life, or my kids, these are civilians. You got beef with me, that's one thing. I don't think you get to drag civilians into it. And I think that that's something that people don't respect enough. And I think that, again, it's disproportionate with female content creators versus male. And I think somebody needed to say it. And, you know, I doubt that I'm the first, but I'm very vocal about this for a lot of reasons. But that doesn't mean that male content creators don't go through similar things, if not different. I've had people not respect my boundaries, whether it be personal boundaries or professional boundaries in terms of what's appropriate. And I've had to deal with that, and I've had to create consequences for my boundaries not being respected, which is a challenging thing to do. It's a very challenging thing to do. And just so you guys know, for the live experience, if you're watching this live, then I will be talking to you guys after we've finished the podcast recording, and we'll keep going live and we'll talk for a minute, but the audio podcast experience will not have those conversations. So you have to subscribe with notifications on. The link to the podcast will be down below. I believe the YouTube URL, if you're interested, is youtube.com/CSAT, as in create something awesome today, podcast. So you can check that out over on YouTube. And of course, the audio podcast can be found on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, and of course now Amazon Music. We hope. But while you guys are pondering over that, I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge one of our sponsors, and we're going to cue that up here.
We thrive thanks to the support from our sponsors. Here's a word from one of them.
So for those of you who enjoy live streaming as much as I do, and you've always wanted a solution that made it easy and simple, I'm definitely going to recommend one of our great sponsors, which is StreamYard. I've actually been using StreamYard for a very long time now, even since they were in beta. And I'm really happy that they are a sponsor of the podcast and also my YouTube content as well. StreamYard allows me to broadcast simultaneously across multiple platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Periscope, and even Twitch. And it's something that I really enjoy because of its simplicity, its ease of use, it's super affordable, and it's also been one of the best podcast apps that I've ever used when it comes to having special guests and also sharing my screen. It's an in-browser app, so guess what? There's nothing that you have to download if you're on a desktop. They also have great mobile capabilities, and I highly recommend them. So make sure you're checking out StreamYard.com. It's going to be linked in the show notes, or you can just go to StreamYard.com. And I want to thank them for being a sponsor of the Create Something Awesome Today podcast and my content on YouTube. They've been big supporters for a very long time. I'm glad that we're now finally working together. And so I'm hoping to bring you guys some future tutorials on live streaming and even doing your own podcast. And this one is thanks to the great people at StreamYard. So make sure you're checking them out. Show some love to our sponsors. And now back to the show. Now, when it comes to boundaries in your business, this is an important one, and a lot of content creators neglect this, in my opinion. There are healthy boundaries that you have to set, not only when it comes to you and your audience, but also in how you conduct your business. And I think that something that people neglect when it comes to this is establishing what you will and won't do when it comes to working with people, and also what's off limits and where your boundaries lie. And I think that one of the things people don't realize is that boundaries also take the form of your contract negotiations when you're doing collaborative content with a brand on their channels, or even when you're doing sponsored content on your YouTube channel, in terms of what is and isn't allowed, and also what access you want to give them and tie yourself to them in terms of your brand, and vice versa. There's a lot of clauses and things that come up in these contracts. And the thing is, you do have the right to renegotiate or reject these things, or not have to take the deal that's presented. You can counter offer. And a lot of content creators, especially early in their career, don't realize that you don't have to just take the deals that are offered to you, and that you can set boundaries, but also you have the right to sever relationships and ties. An example would be, I had to sever a relationship with the multi-channel network that I signed with as a small YouTube content creator, because frankly, they weren't really doing much of anything for me. And when I severed that relationship, they had also were in the process of selling off the company, and they still owe me over $3,000. They owed me almost $4,000. They only made one payment. It was for a little over $500. They made it 3 months after they said they were going to, and about maybe 8 or 9 months past when it was owed. So you want to talk about respecting people. That's, they had done things like delayed payments and all these other things in the past. And so I felt like I had to sever this relationship because I wasn't getting enough out of it. And I didn't feel like I was being respected and treated well, especially given where I started with them, the size of my channel, how long I had been with them, and not really gotten any benefit. So from my point of view. So I think that you have the right to look at relationships and say, you know what, this relationship, whatever it is, whether it's personal or professional, you can say, you know what, I'm severing ties and this relationship has reached its expiration date. That's another and a very strict way of enforcing boundaries and creating consequences is, look, if this is how things are going to be, you don't get access to me. If this is how it's going to be, I don't want to maintain this relationship. Sometimes part of setting and enforcing your boundaries is severing and ending relationships. And so that can be a real thing. Also, sometimes when it comes to collaborations, people aren't clear about their expectations, and they're not clear about boundaries with that either. And also, it's important to, like I said, whether it's your audience, other content creators, the media, or the brands, you have to draw lines in the sand and say, here's my expectation of how I will be treated. I won't engage if I'm treated differently. No, I don't owe you anything. And you have to be firm. You have to be firm when it comes to saying, here are my boundaries. This is off limits. Whether that's that you are not allowed any access to people in my personal life or intimate details of my personal life, that's off limits to you. And you have to honor that. You have to enforce that. You have to be firm, and you have to be consistent about that when you draw those lines. The other thing you have to do is when it comes to how people are allowed to treat you, you have to draw lines. You have to say, that's not okay. And here's why that's not okay. And don't do it again. And again, just asking you, well, what if I do it again, is crossing the boundary, and that's enough to justify severing the relationship as far as I'm concerned. Trying to test your boundaries, trying to test your limits, trying to quote unquote see where the line is, as far as I'm concerned, that's grounds for, nah, you're done. Like, I don't think you're owed a warning either. I think just saying, here's my boundaries, and someone saying, well, what if I cross them, is a challenge. And I don't think you have to say, I don't think you have to give someone a second chance at that point, to be very real with you. I think that's about being firm. And again, a lot of people in internet culture, social media, YouTube, Twitch, all of it, a lot of them don't appreciate the concept of boundaries and respect, because they make up their own rules and they pretend the internet is this fantasy world. I'll give you a primary example. One of the largest conversations that I've seen happening is people pretending that the YouTube community guidelines are vague to them. And I think it's disingenuous, and I think it's a bad faith argument, and I think it's feigning ignorance as if ignorance is an excuse. You know what they say? They say ignorance of the law is not an excuse, and I think that that applies when it comes to negotiations and contracts and things of that nature. And make no mistake, YouTube's terms of service is a legally binding agreement, homie. And it's not nearly as strict as most employment contracts. It's not nearly as strict as the negotiations for brand deals. So any influencer, any content creator that says that the community guidelines for harassment is vague, either A, did not read them. And if they're a larger content creator, their lawyer should have read them to them. If you're a content creator and you're big enough, you have a lawyer, or you have access to one, or you've needed one at some point. And if you think that the YouTube terms of service, a contract that is directly tied to your brand, your revenue streams, and everything you do, if you believe and truly believe in good faith that the YouTube terms of service are vague, then if you're a big enough content creator, aka anyone over 100,000 subscribers, your lawyer should read it to you and explain it to you, and that should be the end of it. And you should then say, I understand and I comprehend and I get it, or get a new lawyer. If you need one, I recommend my good friend Ian Corzine. He is a YouTube content creator who's almost at 100,000 subscribers now. He's one of my favorite people in the internet. He's a social media lawyer. He's done entertainment law, and he knows this stuff in and out. And he's also on the platform, so he understands the plight of being a content creator, while understands the nuances of the law. And so he's the perfect person to have in your corner. Ian is not sponsoring this episode, by the way. But my point is, if you believe in your heart of hearts that YouTube's terms of service and community guidelines, because I can understand a little bit on the copyright side, that's different. But the community guidelines, if you think that that's vague and that that's not self-explanatory, one, I have to question your, like, if you're a grown adult and you don't understand this, and you don't understand, and you've never, like, because I would have to ask, well, have you ever worked a job and ever had to do job training, and did they ever walk you through HR and the harassment policy at your job? Because if you've ever worked a day job, worked in corporate America, even worked in food service, and you've had to go through HR and the protocol and sign the employment contract and read the employee handbook and the harassment policy, you can't look at the YouTube terms of service and say that that crap's vague. That's you feigning ignorance. That's a bad faith argument, and that's acting as if ignorance of the law is an excuse, and it's not. And so that's number one. Number two, if you're a YouTube content creator and you're over 100,000 subscribers and you genuinely, truly in your heart of hearts don't think that you understand the YouTube terms of service and the community guidelines and the harassment policy, your lawyer is supposed to read it to you. And if you're at 100,000 subscribers, you're probably supposed to either have a lawyer or have access to a lawyer or have contacted one. And that is something that you need to do. And if you don't understand it after your lawyer explains it to you, get another lawyer. That's straight from the heart business advice from me to you. So that's real. Okay. And then the next thing is, all right, if you look at the YouTube terms of service and harassment policies, and if you think that you don't know where the line is, here's the easy test. think about what you're going to say and how you're going to behave. Then imagine that you're at a bar or a nightclub or a restaurant, and that the subject of your criticism is a paying patron of that bar or restaurant or nightclub. Now imagine that you are publicly doing this at that place directed at them. And now ask yourself, is the venue and the owner and the management of this establishment going to come and tell me that I need to leave, grab me by the neck, or are some dudes gonna probably roll up on me and say you got to go? And that's a really good real life litmus test for whether your content is over the line or not, or out of bounds. It's not that complicated. It's not that complicated. If you don't think that you could say or do this to somebody at a bar, a nightclub, or a restaurant and not have consequences, then you shouldn't think that you can do it on the internet and the platform isn't justified in offering you consequences. That's a bad faith argument. That's a bad faith argument. Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequences, and it doesn't apply to private establishments. And that's not an attack on criticism, and it's not an attack on commentary. It's an enforcement of boundaries, and it's an enforcement of the rules that you legally agreed to abide by in the terms of service by using the service, which is no different or more stringent than an employer contract that you would be obligated to uphold if you worked at a company. It is no different than a code of conduct that you would be obliged if you were at a venue as a contractor. You would be obliged to honor the rules, policies, guidelines, and behavior standards of the venue while you're under contract. So again, if you're a big YouTuber and you're pretending you don't understand how the community guidelines work, if you don't know how the harassment policy works, if you don't know where the boundaries are, talk to your lawyer. If your lawyer can't explain it to you, fire them and get a new one. And if you don't know where the line is, try your material out in public at a venue with some people who are paying patrons of the venue and see how the manager and the establishment treats you there, and then you'll know where the line is, because you can't sit there and pretend that the internet and the real world don't overlap and that it's a fantasy world called the Wild Wild West where you get to play by your own rules. That is not how it works, homie. The internet is the real world. The internet is real people, it is real consequences, and it is a real business. YouTube is a platform and a venue, and they are a private entity and a business. They're not your damn playground where you get to do whatever you want without consequences. Sorry, that's the truth. And therefore, when it comes to people's established boundaries, the reason that the creator policies exist is because they would exist in every other formal business and establishment and venue. They exist. The terms of service and how strict or harsh or whatever you think YouTube is nothing. Like, does anybody in the live audience, do you really think that YouTube's terms of service are any harsher or restrictive than any employer contract you've ever been under as an employee? Is YouTube stricter than any employer you've ever had? Let me know in the live chat. And for those watching the replay anywhere, let me know in the comments if you believe that YouTube is more strict than a traditional employer in terms of the contract, or is it less strict? Because I would argue that YouTube is infinitely less restrictive than an employer. Number two, if you are a large YouTuber, you cannot feign ignorance of how the harassment policy works, because one, they're very clear about it. And two, if you're a big YouTuber, you are a big YouTuber. You have a lawyer, you know contracts, you've signed contracts to do brand deals. You know better. You can have YouTube's policies explained to you by someone who understands the legal context and legal jargon and have it translated to English for you, because that's what lawyers are for. That's what lawyers are for. So that's practical. And then on top of that, I think if you've ever held down a day job, and again, maybe it's just that there are a lot of young, successful content creators that never have had a traditional job. This is an argument for why it's really good to get real world work experience. And so in the real world, in a real world work experience, you've had to go through HR, you've had to do on-site training, and you've been given guidelines on behavior, code of conduct, and harassment. And if you've never worked a traditional day job, you just have to ask yourself, would what I'm about to do violate the code of conduct at the school I attended in high school or the college I attended for university? That makes it real easy too. That makes it super easy if you just look at it from, would this fly in terms of the student code of conduct and my student handbook? That's it. So for everybody who never worked a traditional real world job and they've only worked on the internet, well, you went to school, I assume. So yeah, unless you were homeschooled, you can't feign ignorance on that. And you have to ask yourself, would this be allowed or tolerated by the administration of my school? Simple. So I wanted to address that one in particular because I think it bleeds into a lot of things and a lot of your YouTube content creators. And again, it was a tangent. It was a rant. That itself may be good for the clip show. It might make it to a separate video that I make at some point. Again, I'll have to be thoughtful about my tonality because again, I know that will be something that some content creators disagree with or make bad faith arguments against. Now, moving on to something that I think is important before we wrap up here and then we go into the after show for the live audience. I want to talk about the importance of boundaries when it comes to people you work with, because some of you are getting into the place where you have your own teams. And I think it's important for you to establish boundaries with that, and also boundaries in your business. Boundaries in your business as an entrepreneur or as a creator who is becoming entrepreneurial and hire a team under you. You need to set boundaries on when it's okay for people to call and text you. Okay? People shouldn't have unlimited access to you in terms of calling you and texting you all hours of the day or night. You should maintain and think about some kind of regular business hours for yourself, at which point you don't respond to calls, you don't respond to text, you don't necessarily check your emails. You should have some business hours in place to set boundaries for yourself and really think about that. You should not be trying to do this 24/7. That's not respecting yourself, and that's not setting healthy boundaries in your life and separation in terms of your work-life balance. So I think that is very important. And I think that it's very practical to say to yourself, you know what? The phone is off in terms of I'll go to the voicemail, I'll respond to it tomorrow. And you have to be firm in that, and you have to be consistent in that. I think in terms of how people can reach out to you, if you tell people that it's okay to DM you for this, but not for that, honor that. And if people don't know any better, say, hey, this is how I want to have outreach done. If you need something, please email me or do this or that, or hey, things like that. And also telling people that you do interact with. Here's another one. You need to set boundaries with your friends and your family as an influencer or someone on social media, a content creator, in terms of what they can or can't do when it comes to your privacy. I've known larger content creators who have told me that they've had old friends or family members kind of sell them out in terms of sell private information about them. I'm not even joking. That's a real thing that happens. So you need to have those boundaries in your life. And look, sometimes that means that there's going to be people that knew you from way back when that you're not going to be able to keep into your life because they're not going to respect your boundaries, and they're going to sell you out, and you can't necessarily trust them. So you have to think about who you can trust in your life and set those boundaries and really keep some notes and some tabs on whether is this person ever going to betray me in a desperate situation and rationalize it because of my success. And so you need to kind of be a little bit ruthless, unfortunately, in terms of the boundaries that you set with your friends and family and what's okay. If you don't want people to know where you are on vacation or what neighborhood you live in, you got to be telling some people, hey, you can't tag me in selfies. You can't live stream or record or put me in your Instagram when we're out in real life, or you can't do those things. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're at dinner and then either somebody or somebody who recognizes you comes out and tags you and post it right away, you tell them, hey, I'm happy to do a selfie for you, whatever, but can you wait till like tomorrow to post that? Because I don't want everybody showing up here, or I don't want people following me home or whatever. And again, people need to respect that. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about. These are the kind of things, and I get into a lot of these details with my students at awesomecreatoracademy.com. Like when I do coaching with people, whether it's one-on-one coaching or whether it's my group coaching program, we talk about how we actually have to live and move as a content creator, as a public figure, as an influencer, and boundaries and security is a big deal. And again, a lot of people are reluctant to talk about this for a lot of different reasons, but also a lot of people haven't considered or worked all the angles. I've had so many conversations with content creators about how some of this stuff has gone wrong that I have this endless checklist that I'm adding to. And so this is a lot of the nuanced stuff that I like to teach people and train people on. But the reality is, to be frank with you, some of it doesn't make for YouTube content that somebody would watch or would click. And that's also why I love doing this podcast with you guys, because I love the long form information, and I love that we're able to get into more heady subjects that don't lend themselves to a nice digestible 10 to 15 minute video on YouTube. And so that's why I think is important. There are a lot of things when it comes to setting and establish these boundaries and protecting yourself and your safety and your privacy. And you have to establish those boundaries sometimes, whether it's with fans, friends, or even family. I mean, that's real. That's just how it is. And you have to establish them within your business, like I said, in terms of saying, you know what, there's a time when this gets shut off. There's a time when it's like, nope, don't call me, don't text me, I'll get back to you. So I think all of those things matter. I think that they're all very important. And I think that they're often neglected. So that's kind of what my thought process is here. And one last shout out here in the show notes. I wanted to shout out our friends over at TubeBuddy, who sponsor this show from time to time.
We thrive thanks to the support from our sponsors. Here's a word from one of them.
One of the best tools that I've ever seen as a YouTube content creator is TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is the ultimate content management tool, the ultimate life hack for every single YouTuber. Whether it comes to managing your SEO and being able to rank for YouTube search, whether it comes down to being able to do A/B testing to know which thumbnails might actually perform better with your audience, or even just being able to do the research for your ideas when it comes to choosing your topics and understanding which one is going to resonate with your audience. TubeBuddy has the most robust set of tools and features that I've ever seen as a YouTube content creator. I use it pretty much every day. My team uses it, and thousands upon thousands of creators from this community have chosen to use TubeBuddy as their secret weapon when it comes to YouTube. So if you want to check them out, go to tubebuddy.com/awesome, and you can go ahead and download a free version of that. That is a free version. It does not expire. It does not offer all the great features that I use as somebody who has the top tier version, Legendary. And I really think that name is appropriate. And so if you want 20% off of any of the paid plans from TubeBuddy, they've offered our audience a 20% discount code. Just use code Roberto's Buddy, and you'll get that 20% off for the lifetime of your account. And also, by choosing to use TubeBuddy, whether you decide to get the free version or the paid version, you are supporting the channel, the podcast, and all of our efforts here. So thank you so much to TubeBuddy for helping sponsor and support the content, and also for just everything they do for our community. So shout out to our friends over at TubeBuddy. All right, so I think that my closing thoughts for the show today are really that I want you to be thoughtful. I want you to really think about where your lines in the sand are in terms of where you want to have these boundaries. where are the boundaries that exist in the intimacy that you have with your audience, the access, what details are off limits. I want you to think about the boundaries that you want to have with brands and sponsors and how you want to be respected and treated. I think you need to set boundaries in how people access and communicate with you. And I think you need to have real conversations with the people in your life and figure out where their boundaries are. Is it okay for them to be brought into your life as a public figure? Is it okay for the details of your relationship to be shared, whether it's a significant other, whether it's your family? Do you want your kids to be involved in your brand? And do you want your audience to have any kind of access to them or to be involved with them? You have the right to set those boundaries, and the people in your life have the right to set their boundaries as well and say that just because you became a public figure doesn't mean I want this to invade my space and my life. And so I think you need to have those healthy boundaries. And when it comes to respecting other people's boundaries, you need to do that too. And the YouTube policies, the creator on creator harassment policies, they exist for a reason. And you would have those same policies in any other work environment in the world. YouTube is no different, and you need to respect your fellow creators as basically co-workers, colleagues, contemporaries, and people that share a space and a platform with you. They deserve respect. And the thing is, you can have valid, good faith criticism without crossing the line of harassing or disrespecting people's boundaries. And if you don't know how to do that, your lawyer can explain it to you. And if you don't know how to do that, I suggest you try your material out in the real world and see how that goes. So those are kind of my final thoughts on this topic as we end the podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. If you're in the live audience and if you are listening out there, we'd love to have you in the live experience. We usually do this on Wednesdays. If you want to be alerted in advance of the podcast, please follow me in all social media with notifications on at Roberto Blake. My most active ones are Twitter and Instagram. And of course, you can subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel, youtube.com/CSAT podcast. That's CSAT, as in create something awesome today, podcast. And definitely look forward to more episodes and some great interviews. We have a couple of people that we want to bring onto the program. Just some teasers, Sarah Dici, Pat Flynn, many others that you might be familiar with. And I'm really looking forward to bringing more guests onto the program. You guys can always, of course, let me know if there are guests that you would like to have on the program. Feel free to tag me and them in Twitter, and we'll try and see if we can collab, connect, and make that happen for you. Anyway, guys, that's it for the show. If you're in the live audience, stay tuned for the after show. And of course, create something awesome today. Take care.
Are you an entrepreneur, creative?
Oh.
This episode has ended, but your creative journey continues. Visit createsomethingawesometoday.com and access all links and resources mentioned in today's show, all designed to help you create something awesome today.
All right, and that is a wrap for the podcast. I have that recorded now, and so we have that clipped off perfectly at about roughly 50 minutes. So good show, everyone. Did you guys enjoy the program this morning? Did you guys enjoy the show? And are you guys glad that I'm trying to bring the podcast back again? How'd you guys feel about that? Would love any of your feedback. Yes. Hi, Roberto. So nice to see the podcast taking off again. Yay. Thank you for that, Adrian. Thank you, Cake Pop Clara. Appreciate you and all the support. Really do. You liked it? Awesome. Yeah, no, and I saw in the live chat that you guys definitely kind of agree with me on the concept of boundaries. What did you guys think about my thoughts and my belief on how YouTube's policies work in terms of community guidelines and harassment? Thank you, Sabni. Thank you, Brooke. Psalmist Scribe. Thank you, Elijah. You said you came in late. The topic was boundaries, and I talked about respecting boundaries. You can definitely watch the replay, Elijah. This is going to be up I have to start making thumbnails for this, or I need to hire an apprentice graphic designer to actually do all this stuff for me because I'm super busy. And then I'm going to also have these edited for a clip show. So I have a clips channel and stuff from the podcast, but also stuff from my YouTube live streams. Some of those nuggets will be cut down. And then also interviews, obviously. I think the next interview is going to be Sarah Dici. And, I'm looking forward to that. I want to have Sarah on. I want to have Lizzie Pierce, my friend Pat Flynn. Would love to have a couple of my other creator friends on. I'd love to have a lot of the mid-tier creators on. We could get a couple of big people, but I'd love to have some mid-tier creators on. They're very grounded in the YouTube experience. I'd love to have, and some other people have agreed to come on. I just got to get up with them. People like Ian Boschwick have to reach out again, but Hank Green has agreed at some point. Chase Jarvis. I'd love to have Jacqueline from Nothing But Tech on. So there's just a lot of creatives in the space that I can have. I'd love to also have some of my folks from Awesome Creator Academy join me and talk about their experience and their come up as content creators, because some of them, even with small audiences, are crushing it and making thousands of dollars, even if they have less than 10,000 subscribers. So I want to share those success stories and have them talk about their experience and give them a spotlight as well. So there's just a lot going on, and I'm trying to, Ali. Yeah. Ali Abdal. I love Ali. I would love to have him on. Would love to have him on. So many people that I would love, even from the financial space in YouTube. I'd love to have my friend Dennis from True Financials on. There's just so many people I can think of. Elijah, you brought up that you like the fact that I did the comparison between traditional work and YouTube. A lot of these young creators never get the social structure that's needed to respect boundaries. I would agree with that. And I think that one of the benefits of having a day job or being part of a team, even playing sports in school, is that you learn a healthy respect for others. You learn things like boundaries. You learn cooperation. I think people who grew up in the bubble of YouTube and being in a bedroom with a camera and their own thoughts, I think that leads to like you said, a lack of socialization and a lack of respect sometimes. And I think that's reflected in the way people approach some of their content or their criticisms or the way they behave on Twitter and things like that. And so that's why I used the example of Pokimane as a streamer, is because I think it represents the most extreme version of that. I think it does a double standard, but then that's why I brought it around to, let's look at two men in the space. Let's look at Gary Vaynerchuk and his kids being off limits, and let's look at Casey Neistat and his kids being off limits. Why would someone's and you can say, oh, well, it's minors or whatever, but somebody that you're in a relationship with, just because you're a public figure doesn't mean that other person signed on to be a public figure. And that's disrespectful to hold that against people in bad faith. It's not valid criticism. It's not a valid point to make. And you cannot hold the concept of transparency hostage against somebody to say that this person in their life now must also be in the spotlight and subject to the scrutiny or the vitriol or the trolling that they have to deal with because that person's a civilian. Civilians are off limits. Civilians are off limits. So that's a real strong stance that I take, is civilians are off limits. Somni says, also, thank you for saying that YouTube is a serious business and that's why it's not a playground. Agree. Too many people from the corporate world don't take YouTube seriously because they see it as just that. That's fair. And I think it hurts the rest of us as content creators. And that's why I don't agree with everything YouTube does 100%, but I also respect it, and I respect where they're coming from, and I think of it as a business, and I expect them to. It's why they cannot be, and they never were, a creator-first platform. There's a delusion that they're a creator-first platform. Now, I have respect for people who make creator-first platforms. My question is whether they're sustainable or viable in a business context. That's the one concern that I have, but I have tremendous respect for creator-first platforms and the ethos behind it and the desire for it. And it's a need. And I think it fills a niche. That's why I want to have Jesse from McJuggernuggets. I want to have him as a guest, and I believe he's tentatively agreed. We just have to work out timing, because I want him to talk about Storyfire. I want him to walk us even through the process of making something like that, because I just think it's a great entrepreneur story by itself. And I'm super into the idea of creators owning apps, because it's another form of IP. And I really want to dig in with him, and I want to pick his brain about that. And I also want to figure out what their policy team looks like and how they approach that, because I think that that'll become an important conversation. I want to know how they approach compliance with government regulation too, because I think that'll be a barrier to content creators, is government regulation when they decide that they want to build their own platforms. David Dobrik's building a platform. I'd love to talk to him about that. So I think that those things matter, and I felt that this is the kind of thing that I want to talk about more. And I want to have nuanced conversations about this. And I want to have these conversations even with people that I may not always agree with, because I think that's important. And I think I can ask them questions, and I think I can be respectful of their point of view, even if I disagree with them, because I'll ask the question because I want to know how they came to that conclusion. I find that explaining how you got to where you're thinking is the harder thing for people. Drink water. People are very good on the internet about very loudly, very vocally, very passionately stating their opinions. What they don't always excel at is framing the logic that led them to their conclusions, or the basis of facts that dictate their opinions. People are very bad, I find often, at being able to lay out the established facts that let me repeat that for you guys. I find that people on social media are often very good at giving their opinions and giving them very passionately and very loudly, and are very poor at laying out the logic, facts, and reasoning that's supposed to back those opinions. What facts and conclusions led you to hold those opinions? People are very bad at laying that out and then being able to make reasonable arguments to support the opinions that they passionately hold. And I find that that is revealed by asking them to explain it in long form, to explain it in detail, no rhetoric, no satire, just give me plain, straight talk, radical candor, no BS, no fluff. Tell me the facts that support your opinions. Show me the facts that support your opinions. Because the thing is, a lot of people, they'll be very passionate and they'll have strong, true, earnest feelings behind something they believe, and then they have no facts to back it up. And I think that's exposed when you're willing to ask questions versus talk over them. And so my approach when I disagree with someone is I want to understand where they're coming from. And I can only understand that if I understand the established facts that dictate their opinion. I need to know the established facts that dictate your opinion in order to understand and to respect that opinion, because I can't respect an opinion that isn't supported by facts. Not really. And that's just because I'm a rational person. I deal in logic and reason and evidence and facts. And, a lot of people don't like it, but facts over feelings, homie. Facts over feelings. And, it's like facts over faith sometimes, in terms of like, oh, well, I just want to believe that, or was like, but no facts support that. Okay, so what the hell? And again, that's not an argument when it comes to spirituality or religion. I'm separating that. I'm talking about when someone believes something, period, with no reasonable or logical or clear path that supports any reason for that to be true, that will hold up to scrutiny and will hold up to questioning. And I don't think it gets to hold equal ground with opinions that are derived from fact. I mean, I hope that makes sense to people. I hope that wasn't too like heavy-handed or anything. I just want you to kind of see where I'm coming from with that, and how I expand a conversation because I'd rather question someone's reasoning than just debate them because we disagree and then try to win over an audience. I think that more ground is gained when someone exposes whether or not there is facts to back up their opinions. Because if I hold an opinion, I usually can point you to the established facts that framed my opinion, just like I did with my thoughts and feelings about YouTube's policies being abundantly clear to me, or why they should be clear to any mid-tier to top-tier creator. So people say, well, I think or I feel that the YouTube policies are vague. There's no evidence to support that assertion. So you think the YouTube community guidelines and harassment policy are vague, or you don't know what harassment is. Did you not know what harassment was when you read your student code of conduct in high school? Did you not know what harassment and bullying was then? Did you not know what harassment and bullying in the workplace is whenever you went into HR and you signed your employment packet and paperwork at your last job? Or did you ever have a job? Okay. If you're a creator with 100,000 to 1 million plus subscribers and you don't understand the legally binding agreement that facilitates your income, well, you're like a very crappy business person, number one. So maybe you don't call yourself an entrepreneur. Maybe you're a content creator, but not an entrepreneur if you don't understand the legally binding agreement that the platform where you make your money off of is holding you to. And then two, if you don't understand it, your lawyer understands it and should explain it to you. And you should ask for that because you're paying them. So that's part of the service. And if they can't explain it to you to a point where you now understand and comprehend, fire them and hire another lawyer. Or if you've gone to two or three lawyers and you still can't understand what the terms of service, the harassment and policy guidelines are, go to effing therapy because you're probably a sociopath. You know, just saying. Not here to diagnose anybody. I'm just saying, like, you know, /s/sarcasm is like, yeah, maybe you go to therapy. Maybe if a lawyer can't explain to you the legal definition of YouTube's creator harassment policies, maybe you're just a damn sociopath and you need some therapy. If 2 or 3 lawyers can't get through your skull, here's where the line is. Here's your legal obligation. Here is what the company is holding you to. Because there's no way in hell in my mind that you don't understand the harassment policy if you, one, had to uphold bullying and harassment policies as a matter of your student code of conduct when you went to school, unless you were homeschooled and not socialized as a result of that in that particular way, then you'd have an excuse. If you ever worked at a company and had to sign all the HR paperwork and read the code of conduct for your employment contract, you had to adhere to harassment and policy guidelines there. And so if you don't know the line based on that, I wouldn't be shocked if you were fired, or I wouldn't be shocked to hear, well, you never had traditional employment and that you've only ever done the internet thing. And then if you're successful at it to the point of having 50, 100,000, a million subscribers, you have a lawyer, you have access to a lawyer, you should be using a lawyer for things, and you should understand the legally binding terms of your the platform that makes you your money. And if you don't, you're crappy at this. And so if you don't understand it, have your lawyer explain it. And if that doesn't work and you still don't understand it after a lawyer explains it to you, you need professional help. You need professional help. That's just, again, but I showed you facts to back up that opinion. I showed you logical and reasonable ways of coming to that conclusion. And I don't think anything I said was unfair. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Let me know real quick. And again, I'm hitting up some of your comments here. So, Avant-Garde says, completely agree. Thank you for that. You know, again, if someone disagrees, I'm happy to, for a few minutes, ask some questions about that. But I've got about 5 minutes here, and then I've got to work on a different project here. But I do like hanging out with you guys. I don't want to spend much longer than an hour just so that this is consumable later and it's easier to edit. Thank you guys for hanging out. I'll take 1 or 2 more questions or comments or thoughts if you guys want to drop that. But otherwise, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I'm going to try and do this on Wednesday mornings, Eastern Standard. We'll figure out a schedule at some point. And of course, there are going to be interviews where I just upload the interviews and I upload clips of the interviews. And again, we do have a clip show channel. I'm going to see if I can look that up real quick for you guys and drop it in the live chat if you guys want to subscribe in advance to the clip show. But, you know, working on that as well. Let's see. Can't seem to find the URL for the clip show right now. Actually, wait a minute. Maybe I have it over in my featured channels. No, I don't think I do yet. Or actually, I might have it in the features for this one. Nope, not yet. Okay, I don't have the URL for the clip show yet, but I'll drop that in social media once we have some clips up there, and then I'll start promoting that. So we do have a question real quick here from Brooke. How do you explain new boundaries to current clients? Great question, Brooke. So when it comes to new clients, you're onboarding them. So they don't already have a pre-existing relationship where they have expectations or, oh, the way things used to be. So when it comes to new clients, you establish and set boundaries in the onboarding process. Okay, here's my preferred form of communication. Hey, I'm here for you. I'm here to support you, but also I want to make sure that I'm fair to all of my clients. So use this as the first form of communication or outreach, or if it's not urgent, don't do this. And also my hours that I'm available to be called are from here to here. This is when I'm available to be called. Otherwise, I'm running the business or I'm doing stuff with my kid or whatever it is. So make sure you just set those boundaries early enough in the relationship so expectations are set from the beginning in the onboarding process. So if you have new clients, if you're working as a business, as an entrepreneur, have an onboarding process, establish boundaries and methods of communication and contact and business hours, and make sure people honor those. Even for current clients, if it's not new clients, if it's current clients, do this. When it comes to current clients, tell them that you've had to, especially COVID is a good time to do this. Say, hey, with everything going on with COVID, I've had to rearrange and reorganize workflows, systems, and even my team. And this is how we would prefer for you to do outreach now, or this is how we're structuring things now. And we had to put this in place in order to make sure that we're staying on top of everything and that we're also being fair to everybody. So here's what the new process looks like. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to help you with this adjustment period, but this is the new protocol. And boom, there you go. So with current clients, you just tell them what the new protocol is, what the new methods are, and what the new systems look like. You don't have to give a massive explanation, especially during COVID right now. COVID itself is a justification to change anything, and people respect that, and a lot of them are doing the same. Otto brought up something. I've never had to consider boundaries, but I'm guessing that's a sign that I need to respect myself more often. I could at least have policies for anyone speaking behind my back or taking too much of my time. Absolutely. For anything like that. Absolutely. And I think it is a way to respect yourself. And that's why I want to establish the importance. And also, again, respecting other people's boundaries is also important. And I think sometimes one of the best things you can do, one of the kindest things you can do for somebody is ask them, hey, is there a point where I've overstepped my boundaries with you? Because if so, I want you to be honest with me and I want to correct that. And I also want to apologize and I want to know where your lines are so that I can respect you. Just asking that is such a sign of your good intent and your character and your earnest feelings toward a person. And I think that they would really appreciate that. So maybe ask people that you are involved with, that you associate with, that you work regularly with, or that you have a strong relationship with or would like to, ask them where their boundaries are. Ask them if you've ever crossed those boundaries. Tell them that you want them to be honest with you. Give them permission to be honest with you. Radical candor. Tell them to be honest with you about those boundaries and to know where their lines are so that you can respect the line and you can be held accountable. Asking them for, like, giving them permission to hold you accountable to respecting them and to knowing where those boundaries are is going to be this huge relief to someone. And it tells them that you care, and it tells them that you respect them, and it tells them that you have good intentions. Yeah, that would have been really good in the actual audio podcast. Again, I'll revisit this topic because I know that I'm going to end up talking with this about this with several creators. So I'll make sure and I'll bring it up then. Yeah. Avril, we're getting ready to head out. How do I deal with burnouts? I actually did a video about 2 months ago on my YouTube channel with regard to creator burnout. And so definitely make sure you're watching that. I have some questions about the microphone that I'm using. If you go to kit.co/Roberto Blake, you'll actually be able to see all of my gear and what I use for the podcast. And so definitely make sure you're checking that out. I'm going to try and drop that here in the live chat for people across platforms, but that's kit.co/Roberto Blake, and you'll be able to see all of my different setups if that's something that you're interested in. So make sure you're checking that out. All right, so I think that's it for the show. And it looks like Periscope may have also just died or is having some kind of difficulty. So that's cool. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. Stay awesome. Please enjoy the replay. I'll get a thumbnail up at some point for this and for the previous episode that we did. The audio podcast will be coming soon. We just have to make sure we check some of that for editing and quality control. And of course, everybody, stay awesome. Go out there, create something awesome today. Hopefully, see you next week. Take care.